Guys, can we have a round of applause for Joe Woodham, please? Thank you, Joe. So, Joe, can you share a little bit of how you started off and how you kind of got to where you are today, please?
I'll start from recruitment. I got my first job in recruitment in 2008. So I got offered I come from a sales background. I got offered a job in recruitment. And I had absolutely no idea what recruitment was.
It's cutting out, is it?
At the time, and less about IT. So I thought I'd give it a bit of a shot and sort of jumped in. The next couple of years, I had my journey from sort of a small recruitment company to a global. Learned quite a lot along the way, and towards the end, I started to really specialize. Just keep going. All right. Started to really specialize in what I did, and in doing so, I started to build a personal brand. And really started to, I guess, build some really good relationships with the businesses that I was working with at the time. And in doing so, I started to notice that there was quite a large gap in the market in terms of the way the recruitment company that I was working for at the time was asking me to deliver my services, and then the way that my clients wanted me to deliver what I was doing. So in 2012 or 2011, I kind of decided, well, I've always wanted to run my own business. It's probably now or never. Saved up a bit of money so I could sort of float myself for a couple of months and go, all right, let's give it a crack and see what we can do. So in 2012, I started working from home, which back then, I guess it wasn't as common, but it was quite enjoyable. And after a couple of weeks, I made my first deal with my first client, which was a small tech company at the time called Redbubble. And I think closing my first deal, it kind of gave me that realization, wow, I can actually do this. There's a future and I probably can make this work. So I was quite lucky. My first client being Redbubble, at the time they were pretty small, but they grew quite rapidly. So I kind of tacked my business onto the back of their growth, I suppose, and I learned a lot from that journey. I was working pretty closely with the CTO there at the time, and they kind of gave me a lot of guidance in what they wanted me to do. And I was able to shape what I was doing with them and offer that service to other clients and sort of grow around that. In that, I was really focusing on trying to build a personal brand and leverage, I guess, my niche that I had found and cut into that. So I was trying to do things differently to what other recruiters were, and I think that's where I really sort of hit my strides and found a lot of growth.
And were there any moments a little bit like Andrew where you're working from home and you thought to yourself, maybe this is a bit of a depression phase, or any hurdles in those early days for you?
Not a depression phase. I think the fear of failure was my biggest issue at the start. You have a few wins at the start, but then you have a few things that don't go your way. And I don't know, I've always put a lot of pressure on myself to try and move forward as quick as possible, and having people kind of looking at you going, all right, you've given up a good job to go out on your own, and sort of judge you, I suppose, more than anything. So I put my pressure back to make sure that I am doing things right and succeeding. And I think that was my biggest issue, is I was always worried that I'd have to go back and get another job, and that scared the shit out of me. And it did for a long time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And going back to relationship building and understanding the needs of your clients, kind of, what were some of the key things you were learning early on about the relationship building process?
I guess recruitment's pretty standard. Like you can, what our job is to go out and find the best talent and deliver that for your client. But I think trying to forget what other people were telling you to do from a recruitment perspective and just listening to each client. Each client's very, very different, and they want recruitment done in an individual style. So really just working with them as a business and trying to deliver what they need rather than what I think they need. So for me, I guess building the relationship was really just trying to work closely with my clients, understand who they were, what they wanted, and just deliver that.
Yeah, some good listening skills. So obviously you're wearing a lot of hats at this stage. Kind of, maybe can you share some insights as kind of all the different roles you were taking on board when starting out?
All right, so recruitment is pretty standard. Shit got real when I first closed my first deal. Mm-hmm. I had no idea what an invoice was. So I've closed my first deal. I was like, okay, how do I get paid? That's kind of things. Then I started to understand, all right, there's a lot more to the back end of this business side of things. I really need to actually get get into gear and start learning a few things. So I think the entire journey, at every stage, I've been learning a ton, and that's probably where the passion comes in. I absolutely love every time there's a challenge thrown my way to try and work out, okay, how do I overcome this? What's next? But every step, like hiring a person, oh crap, I have no contract to be able to offer an employee. What do we do here? Oh crap, I need to see legal to work out what we actually need to make this work. It's been interesting.
Yeah, so obviously going through these processes, you've probably got to set them and obviously document them. So when you are hiring and other people can work off these types of processes, how important is it to process setting internally?
Look, I guess we're pretty lucky, like our industry's been around for a long time. So there is a lot of, I guess, like we've got CRMs that basically project manage everything. So everything's kind of structured in a way where you can take someone on board and show them the ropes and they can get up and running. But we document everything. We've got an internal intranet just to make sure if something comes up as an issue or if there's a new process that we need to learn, we document it, just so we know where to find it when we need to.
Yeah. And when you're having maybe some of these wobble moments or you're faced with a big challenge, how do you deal with them personally? Is there any kind of things that you go to relieve stress or?
I think back in the day it was just kind of hide away and just trying to work things out. But now I just go out and talk to people. I think the best way to find a solution to a problem is ask people that have done it before. So I get rid of the anxiety or the stress behind something going wrong by just talking about it and asking for advice from other people. They usually go, hey, I've been through a similar shit situation. This is how we dealt with it. I was like, great, get some tips and on you go.
Yeah. So you're also a member of the EO organisation and using that as a sounding board. What would be, if you weren't a part of that organisation, what would be some of the key things that you would probably look to tap into if you're maybe in the audience this evening?
So when I started out, as weird as this sounds, I went straight to one of my competitors and I got their advice. I was like, how did you start? What did you do? And strange, as weird as that might seem to people, they were open with information. They were more than happy to sort of go, this is how we started, this is people you should speak to. And I've always gone and spoken with my competitors because they're, as much as they're my competitors, they're my biggest allies as well. Like we still share clients, we compete on the same work, but we're in the same industry. We should get along. Yeah.
And so, any kind of new incumbents? Do you are you willing to share any of your learnings as well with somebody that's the new kid on the block, for example?
100%. I catch up with a lot of people who come to me for advice. I think it swings in roundabouts. So the more I give, the more people give back to me. And every time I have an issue or I need something, I just ask people, and they usually are more than happy to give it to me. So that would probably be my biggest piece of advice is don't be afraid to ask for what you want.
Yeah.
People are always willing to help. Yeah. Well, most of the time.
And if you could go back to your earlier days, is there anything that you would do different?
Oh, there's a ton of things I'd do differently, but I'm pretty stubborn, so I'd probably still do it the same way, make all the dumb mistakes, spend as much money doing stupid shit. But I think it's all a part of the process. Like, you come out the other side better off for it, but no, I've enjoyed my journey.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So would you say you're a bigger fan of the journey than the end result? From a sales perspective?
Like, that's the problem. It's like being in sales and being, I guess, quite driven. There's never really an end result, because as soon as you get the end result that you thought you wanted, you're already looking for the next end result. So I think I'd say maybe trying to focus on the enjoyment of the journey and realizing that it is a journey. So every goal is kind of, okay, what's the process that goes behind this, and then just having a bit of fun with it, I suppose.
Yeah. And are you actively setting goals? Can you give us some insights into how you maybe set them if you do?
I'm a bit of a dreamer, so everything I've always done, like all of my clients, 6 months to a year before I actually start working with them, I'll realize, okay, why do I want to work with these people? What benefit for them? What's the benefit for me? Okay, in a year's time, what would it look like if I was actually working with them? And that's probably one of the biggest successes I've had, is every client that I've ever wanted to work with, I've worked with.
Well, yeah. And so giving some insights to the sales process. So some people in the audience may not think they've got a strong sales background. Is there anything that you feel as though they maybe could focus on to try and get their first sale?
It's interesting. I feel like people think sales is a dirty word, but I really think what sales is, it's information aggregating. We're giving people advice or information that they need to make a decision. If I was going to buy a house, it doesn't matter what you say. If I like the house, I'm going to buy the house. If I don't like the house, I'm not going to buy the house. What your job is to give me the information and the facts about it. That's what sales is. So I don't think you should be afraid of asking people for stuff or, I guess, selling your services, because people are, if they're not buying from you, they're buying from someone else. So just give them the information that they need to make the right decision.
So less of the storytelling like Andrew, I suppose. You're obviously selling something different. Okay, so if you're thinking like where you are now, kind of what does the future hold for you and your company?
Well, our business has done a massive pivot in the last 6 months. So I built Tory Recruitment off the back of working for small to medium-sized businesses. So we've been pretty lucky to work with some pretty cool startups. But in the last 6 months, we've made a bit of a transition to doing pure contract work, which startups can't really afford to do pure contract work. So we're working mainly with sort of large corporates now. So for the pivot for us, it's really focusing on the large end of town and getting contractors out rather than worrying about permanent revenue.
So obviously you're working with quite a lot of startups and things like that. What is some of the key trends you're seeing in their success stories? What is it that makes those people successful?
With startup scenes, it's pretty cool. I think some of the things that you'll notice with startups is they are usually trying to do something different or disrupt an industry. Look at MYOB, like they've gone through a massive transition in the last 5 years where they're really trying to reshape and rebrand, and they're trying to, I guess, pitch themselves as a startup in terms of how they're approaching, I guess, the market. So in terms of what's trending, it's just companies trying to do something different and stand out for who they are.
Mm-hmm. And also then going to the other side, which is obviously the people, the talent that you're hiring as well. What is it that makes those types of people stand out to you?
I guess we're going out on behalf of other businesses. So for what they stand out, what makes them stand out is usually the businesses they've worked at. People that are really interested in technology will try and work on interesting projects. So they're going to go work at companies that are using the latest technology or trying to recreate an industry or something like that. So we'll generally target like the competitors of the business that we're working on behalf of and trying to find people from there.
Mm-hmm. Cool. You talked a little bit about kind of when things got a bit crazy and kind of not holding back. So did you have maybe crazy spending moments, or were you able to, kind of keep a rein on things?
What do you mean by that?
Okay, so you talked about things when things were taking off for you, when obviously you launched your business and things were going well. Were you quite sensible in decision making, or were you getting carried away with the journey?
I think I got caught up in the ego side of growing a business. So I actually started to try and grow through growing my staff numbers rather than growing the revenue. And that was more of, like, I thought at the time, probably a bit more of building a brand and how I looked to the industry, whereas it probably wasn't the smartest decision and it was a waste of money, and I probably didn't manage my staff as well as I should have. So I think in hindsight, I probably should have done that very differently, grown a lot slower and not hired as many people to try and, I guess, boost the numbers. And
How long did it take you to realise this?
Probably a year. It's probably been 2 years of growing, then shrinking, then growing, then shrinking, and then sort of now we've realised that, okay, maybe that's not the best option. The market's reacting very different, and that's not the model that I think is congruent with what we want to be doing in the market.
Cool. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, we're going to leave it there for now. We're going to ask you guys to ask some questions in a second, but we're going to have a 2-minute break, everybody. So can we have another round of applause for Joe Woodham, please? Thank you very much, Joe. Thanks, Joe. Cheers, mate. Thanks.